The Mystical Qabalah by Dion Fortune Chapter 6. Achim, the Tree of Life. How do we pronounce Achim? Etz Hashaim. Etz Hashaim. Okay, the Tree of Life, or Etz Hashaim, in Hebrew is a classic descriptive term for the central mystical symbol used in the Kabbalah of esoteric Judaism, also known as the 10 Sephirot and the 22 Paths. It's a diagrammatic representation arranged in 3 columns or pillars, may derive from older sources and is not known to the earlier Jewish tradition. The tree, visually or conceptually, represents as a series of divine emanations, God's creation itself, ex nihilo. I have no idea what that means. The nature of revealed divinity, the human soul, and the spiritual path of ascent by man. In this way, Kabbalists developed the symbol into a full model of reality using the tree to depict a map of creation. It's pretty cool if you're able to encapsulate all of reality into 10 symbols and 22 paths. It's kind of nice. Real nice. Okay, before we can understand the significance of any individual sephirah, we must grasp the broad outlines of the Etz Hashim, the Tree of Life, as a whole. Etz Hashaim. Etz Hashaim. I think that's how it's pronounced. It is a glyph, that is to say a composite symbol, which is intended to represent the cosmos in its entirety and the soul of man as related thereto. And the more we study it, the more we see that it is an amazingly adequate representation. We use it as the engineer or the mathematician uses his sliding rule to scan and calculate the intricacies of existence, visible and invisible, in external nature or the hidden depth of the soul. Once again, the theme of as above, so below is repeated. We'll see that a lot. Moving the microphone slightly away. We may be popping. It is represented, as will be seen from diagram 3, as a set of 10 circles arranged in a certain pattern and connected among themselves by lines. The circles are the 10 holy Sephiroth, and the connecting lines are the paths, 22 in number. 22 in number. That reminds me of The Simpsons. The comic book man asks Lisa on a subway train, I shall let you pass if you answer these questions 3. That's what this 22 in number sounds like. I like it. These questions 3. Very fancy. Each Sephirah, which is the singular form of the word of which Sephiroth is the plural. Okay, Sephiroth plural, Sephirah singular. Okay. Is a phase of evolution, and in the language of rabbis, they are called the 10 holy emanations. The paths between them are phases of subjective consciousness. The paths are grades, Latin gradus, step, by which the soul unfolds its realization of the cosmos. The Sephiroth are objective, the paths are subjective. Interesting. The Sephiroths are objective, the paths are subjective. I'm not sure how to take that, but immediately it strikes me as an analog may exist here. The Sephiroth are destinations, the paths are the ways by which you get there. Yeah, that sounds about right, since paths are roads, and roads get you places, and perhaps Sephiroth is one such place. a destination of sorts. Okay, all right, we've untangled that one. Let it be recalled again that I'm not expounding the traditional Kabbalah of the rabbis as a historical curio. I assume that means a kind of curiosity, a rare, unusual, or intriguing object, right? Curious. In 19th century abbreviation of curiosity. Okay, so we intuited that pretty nicely. Okay, let it be recalled again that I'm not expounding the traditional Kabbalah of the rabbis as a historical curio, but the structure that has been raised upon it by generations of students, initiates all of them, adepts some of them, who have made the tree of life their instrument of spiritual development and magical work. Adepts is one of those words that the author keeps returning to, and it's one of those words that keeps tripping me up. Um, um, so in a modern dictionary, adept is someone who's very skilled or proficient at something. He's adept at cutting through red tape, an adept negotiator. But the author is not using it in this particular way. Right, it's more of perhaps this other way. A person who is skilled or proficient at something, they are adept at kung fu and karate. So in chapter 1, the author talked about a couple of fellas who were no strangers to the court politics. I believe that was either chapter 1 or chapter 2. And those who are followers of the, or practitioners, right? That's the connection. Practitioners of Kabbalah and the mystical arts, etc., are referred to as adepts. They know their way around the tree of life, is what that means. There we go, adepts. Initiates all of them. They know their way around the tree of life. Some of them who have made the tree of life their instrument of spiritual development and magical work. That's why it's worth really examining these things, because what the author is saying without saying, let's say, is that try as we might, we may not achieve a level of familiarity with the subject that we're studying. We initiates, all of us are, right now. All of us. But only few of us will know our way around the tree of life. And true words have seldom been spoken. So any hopes of optimism, I hope they've been dashed with a dose of realism, which I often need. Okay, this is the modern Kabbalah, the alchemical Kabbalah, as it has sometimes been called, and it contains all manner of things beside traditional rabbinical lore, as will be seen in due course. Yes, the author keeps returning to this idea that it's whatever works, folks. It's really what it comes down to. It's whatever works. Roots, reaching back into the historical tradition, but leaves being very much on the cutting edge of where life is meeting with the sun in the process of photosynthesis, right? The leaves are concerned with photosynthesis. So we as practitioners ought to be concerned about the photosynthesis of things. Or to put it differently, synthesization. That's a hard word to say, and I said it correctly. I don't care. Of everything in the past, synthesizing and processing and eliminating the waste. From the future. Let us now consider the general layout and significance of the tree. It will be seen that the circles which represent the Sephiroth are arranged in 3 vertical columns. See diagram 1. The tree of life, as we've seen it before. And that at the head of the center, higher than any other, forming the apex of the topmost triangle of Sephiroth, is the Sephiroth Cather, crown. We saw this word earlier in the previous chapter. Also known as Cather, is the topmost of the Sephiroth of the Tree of Life. Its meaning is crown. It is interpreted as both the topmost of the Sephiroth and the regal crown of the Sephiroth. There we go. To which we referred in the previous chapter. To quote again the words of MacGregor Mathers, the limitless ocean of negative light does not proceed from a center, for it is centerless, but it concentrates a center, which is the number 1 of the manifested Sephiroth, Cather, the crown, and first Sephiroth. Okay. May Blavatsky? This is I've never seen MME. Maybe this is a digital artifact of some sort in translating the book from whatever the original source is into PDF, and that was a mistake. But this MME, May maybe, Blavatsky? Her name is Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. That's her real name, or Yelena Petrovna Blavatskaya. Okay, Yelena Petrovna Blavatskaya was a Russian occultist, spirit medium, and author who co-founded the Theosophical Society in 1875. Okay, so Yelena Petrovna Blavatskaya draws from Eastern sources the term the point within the circle to express the first becoming of manifestation, and the idea is contained in the rabbinical term Neguda Rashuna, the primal point, a name applied to Kether. I see. This is really interesting, right? It all points to the source. Okay. The primal point, the name applied to Kether. So it's the crown, it's the primal point, the point within the circle. Okay. But Kether does not represent a position in space. The Ein Sof, those are 3 words. Ein Sof, or AIN, AIN is the first word. SOPH is the second word. AUR is the third word. Ein Sof, Ein Sofar, the Ein Sof hour. That is I have no idea what that is. Ein Sof in Kabbalah is understood as God. Wow. Okay. But Kether does not represent a position in space. Okay, the crown doesn't represent, the primal point doesn't represent a position in space. The Ein Sof, or Ein Sof, in Kabbalah is understood as God prior to his self-manifestation in the production of any spiritual realm, probably derived from Ibn Gabirol's term, the Endless One, She'an Lo Tikla. Ein Sof may be translated as unending, there is no end, or infinity. It was first used by Israel, who, sharing the Neoplatonic belief that God can have no desire, thought, word, or action, emphasized by it the negation of any attribute of the Ein Sof nothing. Ein can be grasped, Sof limitation. Ein Sof, so it's limitation of nothing. It is the origin of the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light of paradoxical divine self-knowledge, nullified within the Ein Sof prior to creation. In Loranic Kabbalah, the first act of creation, the Tzimtzum self, withdrawal of God to create an empty space, takes place from there. In Hasidism, the Tzimtzum is the only illusionary concealment of the Our Ein Sof, giving rise to monistic panentheism. Wow, monistic panentheism. So I believe that's like monks praying to panentheism. I guess multiple gods. Consequently, Hasidism focuses on the Atman's divine essence rooted higher within the Godhead than the Ein Sof, which is limited to infinitude and reflects in the essence of the Torah and the soul. Wow. So there's really something to this religious, in this case, occultish, Kabbalist. There's something about the language that we as a civilization, we need to explore at a deeper level. For a person to spend most of their lives not understanding these concepts it's a shame. It's a shame. I mean, how deprived would we be not to revel in everybody's histories and everybody's ideologies and everybody's beliefs? That's the idea. I think certainly seems more appropriate for us, considering the alternative. The Ein Sofar has been called a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere, a statement which, like so many in occultism, is inconceivable, yet nevertheless presents an image to the mind and therefore serves its purpose. So, a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Right. So, all and nothing. The paradox. It's quite the paradox, Dion Fortune. Kether, then, and for the matter of that, all the other Sephiroth, is a state or condition of existence. We must always bear in mind that the planes do not tower up one above another into the Empyrean like the stories of a building, but are conditions of being, states of existence of different types, and though they develop successively in time, they occur simultaneously in space. Existence of all types being present in a single being, as we realize when we remember that the being of man is made up of a physical body, emotions, mind, and spirit, all occupying the same space at the same time. That is a very long sentence and a very long paragraph. And a lot to bear in mind, Dion Fortune. But since you said it, let's repeat it. We must always bear in mind that the planes do not tower up one above another into the. Okay, so first of all, when I first read this, I read planes as aeroplanes, but that's not how it's meant. It's meant more as plates or levels um, upon which the games are played. Is it? There's a like a 3D chess. There we go. Okay, so we must always bear in mind that the planes do not tower up one above another into the empyrean, I guess, into the empyrean like this stories of a building. Oh, I see. Let's look up this word. I have no idea what this is. Belonging to or deriving from heaven. Empyrean. Empyrean. Huh. The Empyrean regions, heavenly, celestial, ethereal, upper. Empyrean. Oh, that makes sense, like an empire or an emperor. The Empyrean, sing it to the Empyrean, heaven, the heavens, the sky. Oh, that's nice. Sing it to the Empyrean. The upper regions of the stratosphere, the ether. Yes, the Empyrean, the ether. That's a nice way. That nice word for ether. We can bring it back. We can bring ether back by calling it Empyrean. That's very clever. The wide blue yonder. Oh, that's pretty. The firmament, the welkin. I have no idea what that is, but it sounds awesome. Okay, so we must always bear in mind that the planes do not tower up one above another into the Empyrean like the stories of a building. Right. So the levels do not tower over one another into the skies like the stories of a building, but are conditions of being, states of existence of different types. And though they develop is this successively? Yeah, successively. Geez. Um, Successively in time, they occur simultaneously in space. That's interesting. They develop successively in time. I always want to say something to do with success, but it's not meant as success. It's successively, meaning one after the other, following one another. They occur simultaneously in space. So we're going to come back to this in a second, but let's um, get past the semicolon. Existence of all types being present in a single being, as we realize when we remember that the being of man is made up of a physical body, emotions, mind, and spirit, all occupying the same space at the same time. Okay, so the overarching message of this sentence is to point to a walking contradiction that is our existence. We have the physical body, we develop emotions in time. Of course, we have some kernels of emotions. We have some kernel of mind that gets developed over time, and they're not on the same track. They develop at different times. 18-year-old boys are grown as men in the sense that they have physical capabilities and then some of grown ass men. Um, but if you've ever been an 18-year-old boy, and I have, I can tell you that far from men we are. So, um, so these things develop together and yet separately. So one after the other. Only somewhat being in sync. Okay, now the thing I wanted to get back to is so I've been playing with the idea of switching the meaning of the words time and space. I like doing this. Philip K. Dick has always played with the idea of like backwards time, and I'm a big fan of Pulp Fiction and all of that. So um, I've been influenced. Um, so swapping the words time and space has been really interesting and illuminates things for me, and it makes sense. Doing what I do, it there are demands on uh, my time. Of course, we all have demands of our time from our work, life, etc., family, um, and I rely on my calendar to tell me what to do. I've found that I'm a slave to it, and if it's in my calendar, um, it doesn't have to be a meeting with another person. It could be a meeting with myself to do this, and it's in my calendar. It helps me to stay on track. And of course, I'm blocking off a portion of time, but as I'm doing it, I'm not thinking about it as time. I'm thinking about it as I need some space in my life when I can do this. So it's very practical to sort of switch the two around and think about, oh, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Um, where am I going to do this? Um, and this way you reserve the time on your calendar for the entirety of the project, for example. Um, yeah, and it's it's not hard and fast. You just stick with it most of the time. Don't and the rest play as you go. But let's see what happens here if we swap time and space. Let's see. Though they develop successively in time, they occur simultaneously in space. So let's look at it this way. Though they develop successively in space, they occur simultaneously in time. Right. So inverting those two does reveal some truth. It in fact balances the equation in a lot of ways. So um, our physical body and our emotions and our mind and our spirit, um, they occupy same space at the same time, but they also occupy the same space. Uh, Going back, they develop success. I have such a hard time with this word. Successively in time. They have developed successively in space. They occur simultaneously in time. Right. So it's important to balance the equation, and the equation is this: um, our physical body and our emotions and our mind and our spirit and whatever else is in there is locked somewhat in time. So going through puberty is one such example. The body is undergoing a tremendous transformation, as do the emotions, as does the mind, as does the spirit, etc. Um, and there's many uh, such occasions. Terrible twos, for example, are another such occasion when our bodies and our emotions, etc., are sort of locked. Um, it's as if the body can't grow until the mind and the emotions, etc., catches up, and so that there's this consistent pool. Or maybe the emotions and the mind can't grow until the body catches up. Um, and it's this consciousness um, contending with the organic matter. of sorts, which is not something that I've ever considered before, which again goes back to why I like to switch out time and space, because it truly takes us in some wonderfully bizarre thought experiments. The idea that our consciousness is pulling forward the organic matter, or that the organic matter is pulling the consciousness. Um, Pushing, right? That's Terence. I'm thinking about Terence McKenna's being pulled forward uh, rather than pushed from behind. There's a transcendental object at the end of time um, that keeps pulling us towards it. That's how Terence McKenna saw it. And by inverting this time and space business right now, it got us to that place, which is a wonderful connection to make. But you do with that what you will. Let's move on to the next section. Um, I feel like we've explored this one quite thoroughly. Okay, it's the idea that well, I mean, there it is. This is what is supposed to happen, I suppose. Meditating upon the meaning of such things and seeing where it takes you. And it took us to a familiar place, in fact, the transcendental object at the end of time. C1, Terence McKenna. If anyone has ever watched a heated liquid at saturation point crystallize out as it cools, they will have a useful symbol of Kether. Crystallize out as it cools, they will have a useful symbol of Kether. That's interesting. So I have seen a heated liquid at saturation point crystallize out as it cools. Chocolate pudding is the first thing that popped into my mind. Uh, the skin forms on top, and I suppose that's what the author is talking about. I love that skin, so that's a very strong image there. Fill a tumbler with boiling water and dissolve in it as much sugar as it will take up, and then as the mixture cools, watch the sugar crystals appearing. When you've done this in actuality and not merely read about it, you will have a concept under which you can think of the first manifest coming into existence out of the primordial unmanifest. Wow, I love this. Primordial unmanifest. That's hilarious. First, okay. So that's it. That's interesting. I like the hands-on approach. Um, it's really entry level. Um, I wasn't gonna do this because it just seems like a waste of sugar, but I might. The liquid is transparent and formless, but a change occurs within it, and crystals, solid, visible, and of a definite form, begin to appear. Equally, may we conceive that a change occurs within the limitless light, and Kether crystallizes out. Equally, may we conceive that a change occurs within the limitless light, and Kether crystallizes out. The capitalization of limitless light throws me, and I'm reminded of chapter one, um, rules of engagement, where it was said that some such things will be in fact capitalized. But I don't think they should be taken as something specific, more than the sum of its composite words. That is. So the limitless light, I don't think it's the name of anything, but rather it's referring to a limitless light. I hope I'm not wrong about that. Okay, I do not propose at the present moment to go deeply into the nature of any of the Sephiroth, but merely to indicate the general scheme of the tree. Wow, okay. Uh, it already stretches the imagination, it already boggles the mind. And what Dion Fortune is telling me is that it's only going to get worse from here. All right. We shall go over the ground again and again in the course of these pages until a comprehensive concept is built up. This can only be done gradually, and if we spend a great deal of time upon an individual point before the student has a general concept, much of that time will be wasted because the bearing of that concept on the scheme as a whole will not be understood. Okay, yeah, that's crawl before you walk. We get it. The rabbis themselves applied to Kether the titles concealed of the concealed and the inscrutable height, hinting that there is not a great deal that the human mind can hope to know about Kether. That's disappointing, right? It's to think that there's some degree of knowing that's unpenetrable to us, to the human mind. Of course, what else could be true? We are of limited sort. But it's just disappointing. It is worthy of note that exoteric Judaism, to whose liabilities Christianity is not altogether fortunate heir, holy crap, does not contain any concept of the emanations or overflowing of the Sephiroth one from another. The author likes to do these. I'm not sure what to call them, but other than sentences that I have a hard time reading, that's what I would call them. So it is worthy of note that exoteric Judaism, to whose liabilities Christianity is the not altogether fortunate heir, H-E-I-R, legally entitled to the property or rank of another, a person inheriting, etc. Okay, does not contain any concept of the emanations or overflowing of the Sephiroth one from another. Well, I mean, okay. Well, there was a really complicated sentence to say that Christianity doesn't factor into this. I'm okay with that. It declares that God made the sea and the hills and the beasts of the field, and we visualize this process, if we visualize it at all, as the work of a celestial craftsman fashioning each new phase of manifestation and putting the finished product in its place in the world. A kind of a waterfall development project. This concept kept science back for hundreds of years in Western Europe, and in the end, men of science had to break with religion and endure persecution as heretics in order to arrive at that conception of evolution which was explicitly taught in the mystic tradition of Israel, a tradition with which the writers of the Old Testament were unquestionably familiar, for their works are full of Kabbalistic references and implications. Interesting. Yeah, so we underestimate the courage it took for minds of the 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, times during which, well, time before mass media and before mass media had its way with the civilization, church came first. Well, came prior. I should say. And church had the mass media like control over the civilization. Um, and I know a little bit about living in a country where you're not allowed to say certain things. It's not unlike living in USA of 2018, in fact. Um, and so these men of courage had to speak the words of truth. Better off we are because of them. Thank you. I should hope that we all have that kind of courage. But we don't. But we should. I should. This concept kept science back for hundreds of years in Western Europe, and in the end, men of science had to break with religion and endure persecution as heretics in order to arrive at that conception of evolution which was explicitly taught in the mystic tradition of Israel, a tradition with which the writers of the Old Testament were unquestionably familiar, for their works are full of Kabbalistic references and implications. The Kabbalah does not conceive of God as fabricating creation stage by stage, but things of the different phases of manifestation as evolving one from another, as if each Sephiroth were a pool which, being filled, overflowed into a lower pool. So this is pretty incredible. So I watched a few videos on the creator of human design system or human system design. I'm not sure. I think it's Ram Dass. I think that's the fella's name. I could be wrong. I hope I'm not. It's been a while. But I also started reading his book, and in it, he talks about the idea of chakras and how new chakras have been added at some point about, I want to say 200 years ago or 100 years ago, something like that. I forget. Um, which was a really odd concept for me to get on board with. I figured there's chakras, and they've been around forever, and there's a certain number of chakras, and that's all the chakras there is. But no, he was saying that new chakras are added. And and in fact, his human design system is very much a tree of life, a look-alike. Now that I think about it, and so here it is, second time being introduced to this idea, to this concept of um, different phases of manifestation as evolving one from another, as each Sephiroth were a pool which, being filled, overflowed into a lower pool. That's exactly how, roughly speaking, the author of Human Design System has laid out his argument for these additional chakras. I think 1 or 3 or something in between. And already my resistance to the idea is largely melted. I think it has to do, for all of my kvetching and complaining about previous chapters being too focused on justifying the existence of this book, which I thought was unnecessary. a lot was made of the roots of this knowledge, and to know that people thousands of years from now, thousands of years ago, um, thought in such a way. Well, once again, the author was correct. It taps you into their mode of thinking. It becomes part of you, and then next time you have to do something, anything, you will approach it differently. You will approach it as manifestation, evolving one from another, as each Sephiroth were a pool which, being filled, overflowed into a lower pool. And so, imagining myself as water flowing from one container lower to the next one, I just want to flow to the bottom container and see what's there. Or get as far as possible, as far down as possible. I sense a bit of discomfort with the analogy of going lower and lower to, you know, find more knowledge, more truth, more food for the spirit. But, you know, on second thought, that's where the truth and knowledge resides. It's always where you don't want to see it. It's always with the devil you don't want to face. Okay. To borrow again from McGregor Mathers, hidden in an acorn is an oak with its acorns, and hidden in each of these is an oak with its acorns. Okay. It's a Russian nesting doll of acorns. So each Sephiroth contains the potentiality of all that came after it in the scale of downflowing manifestation. Interesting. Each Sephiroth contains the potentiality of all that came after it in the scale of downflowing manifestation. In the scale of downflowing manifestation. I love when the author gets poetic with it. Cather contains the rest of the Sephiroth, 9 in number, and Chokmah, the second, contains the potentialities of all of its successors, 8 in number. Chokmah. Chokmah. Let's look up Chokmah. Oh, not much. Okay. So there's Catherine and there's Chokmah, and there's not much info about Chokmah in my dictionary. Noted. But in each Sephiroth, only one aspect of manifestation is unfolded. The subsequent ones remain latent, and the preceding ones are received by reflection. The subsequent ones remain latent. Okay, so there's a potential that they won't manifest. And the preceding ones are received by a reflection. Right. Reflection meaning closing your eyes and thinking. Each Sephiroth, then, is a pure form of existence in its essence. The influence of preceding phases of evolution is external to it, being reflected. These aspects, as it were, having been crystallized out in the previous stages, are no longer in solution in the outflowing stream of manifestation which ever proceedeth from the unmanifest through the channel of Kether. Okay. Previous stage and no longer in solution in the outflowing stream of manifestation which ever proceedeth from the unmanifest through the channel of Kether. I have to admit, I don't really understand that sentence. When therefore we want to find the essential nature, the basis of manifestation of a particular type of existence, we get it in the Sephiroth to which it corresponds when we meditate upon the Sephiroth in its primal form. For there are four forms, or worlds, under which the Kabbalists conceive of the tree, and these we will consider in due course. Could it be that it's that physical body, emotion, mind, spirit? Could that be the four? Might be. Okay. The student will find it very helpful to refer to the chapters in the Ancient Wisdom by Annie Besant, which deal with the phases of evolution. These throw much light upon the subject with which we are dealing, though the system of classification is not the same. Okay. Let us conceive of Kether, then, as a fountain which fills its basin, and the overflow therefrom feeds another fountain, which in its turn fills its basin and overflows. The unmanifest forever flows under pressure into Kether. The unmanifest forever flows under pressure into Kether. And there comes a time when evolution has gone as far as it can in the extreme simplicity of the form of existence of the first manifest. Wow. Wow. So, what I'm thinking about here is there's I'm about to make an argument for vegetarianism, vegetarianism. There it is. Mind you, I'm not a vegetarian, nor do I want to be particularly. Um, Full disclosure, I was maybe for 2 months, sometime in my 20s, probably because of a girl. So, for whatever that's worth. But I think I'm about to make an argument for vegetarianism. Vegetarianism. Um, so the way this reads to me is, if we imagine Kether as the crown, let's say, right? And however many, if you imagine the fountain and the basins on multiple levels and water flowing from one basin to another, and imagine whatever, 10 of those, and map it out, roughly speaking, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, and in fact, it shouldn't even be thought of as a tree of life necessarily. I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs is even better. On the very bottom, it's your basic needs: shelter, safety, food, water. Those kinds of things. On the top of the pyramid is self-transcendence. Below that is self-actualization. Below that is there's a few levels in between, or a couple of levels between most basic needs like food and safety to self-actualization. Okay, so stay with me on this one. There's let's read it again just to get back into that. The unmanifest forever flows under pressure into Kether, and there comes a time when evolution has gone as far as it can in the extreme simplicity of the form of existence of the first manifest. So let's imagine the first manifest as the voice in the back of your head, the thoughts that you can't control, the eye behind the eye that you can't see, despite the two eyes in the sentence. And perhaps that's not what the author means by the unmanifest, but let's assume for a second that it is. It's that thing that enters your mind and then has its way with it. And it's that thing that spills down into the lower levels. I'm fighting against myself in the flow. What I'm trying to say is that in order for us to gain a chakra, there we go. That's a good way to think about it. In order for us to gain a chakra, as was proposed in Human Design System, and here it is corroborated by Kabbalah, to open up, let's say, a new chakra, we have to close one of the lower ones down. And that has something to do with the frequency, vibrations, the thought patterns, the intentions that we put out into this world. And of course, what chakra do you close if you have to close one to open another? There we go. That's a great way to think about it. If you have to, and the conditions that I'm setting forth is that you do, if you have to close one chakra in order to open up another one, it would make sense to close the lowest chakra, the one that's focused on the most basic of needs. So, as a civilization and as a society, we figured out that killing people is bad. It's generally frowned upon. And that's a pretty good idea. It got us pretty far. Here we are. But it's not so obvious. Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time. It's not so obvious that we shouldn't be killing each other. After all, we've persisted as species for hundreds of thousands of years, killing one another indiscriminately, pretty much, as if you read any history books at least. And then some 2,000 years ago, we figured out that there's a divine spark in each and every one of us, and that we carry it within us, and that divine spark no man has right to extinguish. Well, it's a pretty good idea. So, let's keep going in that direction. What is the next thing we'll make up? Oh, I don't know. Maybe that every moment is divine and every moment within it has a divine spark, and that it's our job to be custodians of the now. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. So if we're going to close a chakra, and I'm using chakra only for convenience sake, I don't think this is how chakras are supposed to be used. But if we're to close one mode of operating, right, that would be a more engineering, a term that an engineer might use. Modus operandi, right? So, which chakra then do we close? Well, the lowest one, the one that gets us focused on our most basic, drives. While you don't want to kill a person, well, let's just move that slightly forward in the logical direction. Um, don't kill an animal. Um, Perhaps everything that has a heart. I heard a lady on YouTube say that. Uh, so everything that has a heart should be left alone. That's a pretty good rule, right? What if we were to orient our civilization around that? What would that do? What if we were to orient our individual selves around that? What would that do to a person? Well, here's what it would do. It would communicate to yourself and to the universe, but to yourself, um, the intent, your willingness to sacrifice something that's near and dear. How else could you make the intent real unless you're willing to sacrifice something? Um, and this is the sacrifice. The meat has always been. Wow, I didn't expect this argument to go there at all. I am as surprised as you are. But um, the um, the meat has always been uh, the desired sacrifice by the gods. It's just that the meaning has been changed. Um, it used to be we would sacrifice a bull or sheep um, to the gods by cutting its throat or heart out or whatnot. And we have to sacrifice um, again. And this time we do it by sparing everything with a heart. Well, and then once the intent is announced to oneself, and you've submitted yourself a proper sacrifice, not eating anything with a heart, no meat. Um, that still leaves a plethora of things out there to eat. Just no meat. I'm gonna try it. Last night I decided to uh, go on a 30-day sabbatical from meat. So I guess I'm thinking in that direction. And last night I had a tiny little piece of chicken. It ended up in my plate and I ate it. So I broke my resolution immediately. But I was fine with it. I knew I saw a piece of chicken in my plate. Um, it didn't bother me. I ate it. The fact that it was just a little bit of chicken didn't bother me either. And that's it. So, okay, all possible combinations have been formed and they have undergone all possible permutations. Action and reaction are stereotyped. There can be no new development save the combining of the combinations among themselves. Okay. Force has formed all possible units. The next phase of development is for those units to combine into more complex structures. When this occurs, a new and more highly organized phase of existence begins. Oh, okay. All that has already been evolved remains, but that which evolves now is more than the sum of the previously existing parts, for new capacities come into being. Well, so that's exactly how we interpreted this beginning of this paragraph. It is about um, building upon itself, right? And at the point when we reach well, the point where we are not forced to kill one another, we're not forced to eat one another, um, we're not forced to, uh, you know, I meant that in sort of a funny way, cannibalistically, but I'm really talking about animals. Um, so so it makes sense to close the bottom ones, to close the chapter, as it were, to turn a new leaf. And I've been thinking a lot about first principles and how to orient um, both myself and and the rest of the universe in which direction. And I keep coming up with interesting ideas, such as um, our civilization would be transformed overnight if tomorrow we all decided to um, uh, orient ourselves towards arts, and we can all interpret what that means in whatever way we want. Um, of course, primarily I mean that in support of arts, financial support of arts. Also, it means taking up arts. Also, it means redefining what it means to be art. And all of these things, I think they're all up for a review. Um, and and man, if I'm wrong, I fine. Let's prove it to me that I'm wrong. That would be great. Um, but it feels like it might be the right thing to do. And then, of course, it instructs me personally as to how to uh, structure my existence. And I've oriented my existence around arts. Um, so, so that's extremely practical as well. Um, okay, so this new phase represents a change of mode of existence. Indeed, it does. Reorientation of sorts. Just as Kether crystallized out of the limitless light, so the second Sephira, Chokmah, crystallizes out of Kether in this new mode of being. This new system of action and reactions which have ceased to be simple and direct and become complex and tangential. Very interesting. So, Terence McKenna, the most articulate person in the world, the best articulated individual ever, um, uh, talks about this increase in complexity. Um, there's there's a subroutine that's subtle and therefore often ignored by all of us. And it's this subroutine that is um, going from simple to complex. So it all started very simply out of nothing. First, there was nothing, scientifically speaking, and then Big Bang. And then the next moment there was something, but not all of this. Um, And however old the universe is, for the first half of its lifetime, mostly nothing happened. A few chemical reactions here and there. Um, and then, kind of halfway into its present um, timeline, uh, planets start to form, start to congeal, um, complex elements. Eventually, some kind of life form appears in some miraculous process of going from non-organic to organic, which is still unclear to me how that happens, but okay, let's go with it. Um, um, millions upon millions of years go by, A lonely planet in the middle of nowhere evolves proper conditions for a fungi to form and to get destroyed several times, and species that paired with fungi survived because the mycelium is anti-fragile, and uh, it's like a starfish on steroids. You damage it and it only gets stronger. Um, from the fungi, bazillions of years ago, the animal and plant kingdom evolves on this planet. And from the animal kingdom, a bunch of bipedal species come up. I always thought that we were like, how come it was just us? Um, Never made sense to me. I mean, I don't know about you, but my God, I've been asking myself this question since I was a kid. I've always been fascinated with human evolution. Um, why us? Um, and the answer is uncomfortable because we killed everybody else. And unfortunately, we know this to be true. If we pause for a second to consider, um, the odds of us being the only intelligent species that has evolved, well, they're unlikely. Um, and there were, even in our present, 300,000 year timeline of human evolution, there's been other species that could have been just as intelligent. Neanderthals, obviously, but that's only going back 30,000 years. And they may have been the last of the Mohicans, so to speak. When they made contact with us, we killed them off as well. Um, so, so that's why we're the only ones. But it still doesn't explain why there's a consciousness or this kind of intelligence or this kind of self-awareness at all. That we're still left to contend with that. Um, and then, of course, the Industrial Revolution and the technology, and you know, uh, every year, I haven't looked at these numbers since they became astronomical, and that happened years ago. But the numbers that compare the amount of, say, content that's been created, you know, today versus in the previous 2,000 years of our recorded history, or 5,000 years of recorded history. It doesn't even compare. We make more content in one day today than we have in the previous 5,000 years of our recorded history. Say, cut it off at the year 2000, right? Today we make more content than we did in the previous 5,000 years, right? So not only has consumerism, obviously industrial revolution before it, and then consumerism created an explosion of novelty. But then we digitized this behavior and we put it into the ultimate novelty machine, the internet. And so for something like this to be noticed by an author from early 1900s in England, it's quite remarkable. And perhaps this is the gnosis from which Terence McKenna was pulling. And once again, it's really nice to discover the tracks of previous thinkers in these pages. That's a really nice thing to to undergo. We now have two modes of existence, the simplicity of Kether and the relative complexity of a Chokmah. Both these are so simple that no kind of life known to us could be maintained in them. Nevertheless, they are the forerunners of organic life. That's interesting. I wonder if this is meant as first dimension, second dimension, and then third dimension. Us here. We might say that Kether is the first activity of manifestation movement. It is a condition of pure becoming. That's interesting. So yeah, that is what the author is saying. It's like a first dimension, movement, action forward. The commencement of whirling motions, as it is called by the Kabbalists, premium mobile, as it is called by the alchemists. Chokmah, the second Sephirah, is called by the rabbis Mazloth, the sphere of the zodiac. Here we have introduced the concept of the circle with its segments. Creation has moved onwards. Out of the primordial egg has developed the serpent that holdeth his tail in his mouth, the Ouroboros, as Mabel Vatsky chronicles in her invaluable storehouses of archaic symbolism, the secret doctrine, and the Isis unveiled. Okay. Should we read those books? The Secret Doctrine and the Isis Unveiled? I'm not going to make a note of it. You guys let me know. In a similar manner to that in which Cather overflowed into Chokmah, does Chokmah overflow into Baina or Bina, the third Sephirah? Let's look up this Bina and see if we can uncover some additional meaning. Is the second intellectual Sephirah of the Kabbalistic tree of life. It sits on the level below Keter, across from Chokmah and directly above. All right, a picture's worth 1,000 words, guys. Mm. The paths pursued by the emanations in these successive overflowings is represented upon the tree of life by a lightning flesh, or in some diagrams by a flaming sword. I like that, the flaming sword. It will be observed by reference to diagram 1 that the lightning flesh must proceed from Kether outwards and downwards to the right to reach Chokmah, and then turns on a level course to the left and proceeds an equal distance beyond Kether upon that side, and there establishes Bina. The result is a triangular figure upon the glyph, and it is called the triangle of the three supernals, or the first trinity, and is separated from the rest of the Sephora by the abyss, which normal human consciousness cannot cross. Here are the roots of existence hidden from our eyes. Yikes. So, oh, that's interesting. So, I've been to the abyss, or the Negrado. I've described it as Hulk describes as Mark Ruffalo in the Avengers describes his state of being. I'm always angry. I'm always angry, and I'm always sad, and I'm always happy, and I'm always curious, and I'm always depressed, and I'm always jovial. It's those states are accessible to any of us, and the mistake I've made is to think of myself as those emotions. And what I'm learning to do is to think of those emotions as a kind of virus or a bacteria on a strip of paper that's placed under a microscope. And I'm looking through the microscope to see, to untangle these emotions and understand them. Um, uh, and and in talking to people about the abyss, the existential crisis, right? If you're lucky, you're gonna go through it. To not experience it would be to be very unlucky. Right? I always felt like I went through it. I didn't like bounce back. Didn't feel like that's what happened. I feel like I went through it. And to hear this is a little disappointing, because I would think that this last statement could potentially be, I don't want to say incorrect. It's just so, separated from the rest of the Sephiroth by the abyss which normal human consciousness cannot cross. Right. So I know that alchemically, the abyss is known as Nigrado, and Jung talked about it a lot and all of that. Yeah, it can't be crossed. I mean, that's disappointing. So now I have to re-examine what it is that happened to me. Did I come back? I don't know. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. I know I did. Chapter 5, 6, 7, Chapter 7, the three supernals, is coming up next. I hope you enjoyed this reading. Good night.